are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for all right,
keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Thursday, January 23rd. We have lots to cover on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show, as always, is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net. That is gsmcpodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we're going to start off the show. We're going to talk about the Jets making their decision on who will be their next head coach, and that is defensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, Aaron Glenn. He will indeed be their next head coach, so we'll talk about that. We'll also get into talking about Ben Johnson and his press conference, some of my takeaways from it, as he was introduced as the Bears' next head coach. I believe the 19th coach in franchise history, I want to say. So we'll get into that. We'll also talk about the Ravens, the postmortem of the Ravens, as they suffered yet another playoff loss, an early round exit. So we'll get into that as well, what the future holds for that team. We'll also talk about, in the fourth part of the show, the Chiefs on the doorsteps of making history. They're in another AFC Championship game, and they are one step closer to being the first team to ever three-peat. So we'll talk about that. And then in the final part of the show, we'll take not really an early look because it's Thursday, but we did talk about the AFC Championship game a little bit, so we will talk a little bit about the NFC Championship game as the Commanders are set to face off against the Eagles. It'll be the third meeting between these two teams this season, so we'll talk about that and, some somewhat early thoughts on that game as well. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about Aaron Glenn being hired as the Jets' next head coach. And he spent some time with the Jets. He was a first-round pick back in 1994, and he was there from 94 to 2001, and he saw a lot during his time. He saw the good and the bad during his time with the Jets. They went through a lot of head coaching changes while he was playing there, so he kind of, has a feel, well, not kind of, but he does have a feel of how things have gone on here in this organization. And for me, when it comes to Aaron Glenn, he did a good job with the Lions this season. I know they dealt with a ton of injuries on defense, and that's kind of one of the reasons why, they lost on Saturday. But he did the best he could. And, he comes over to a team that, is looking to, have some success finally. And it's been a long time since the Jets have had a successful season. He, like I said, he's familiar with the Jets. He was part of the organization. And they really think he's a good fit. Now, do I think he's a good fit? Well, only time will tell. That's really what it comes down to. Because the Jets, they have been notorious for hiring first-time head coaches. And you look at the track record over the course of the last, 15 years. Rex Ryan was a first-time head coach, brought them to back-to-back AFC Championship games. Then he went to Todd Bowles, and they did have a good year his first season. It's just, that last game of the year, they lost in Buffalo. coincidentally enough, against Rex Ryan, and they missed the playoffs despite going 10-6. And then you had Adam Gase, which did not pan out. Then you went to Robert Saleh, a first-time defensive guy as a head coach, and that didn't pan out. And now you're going to Aaron Glenn. And from what I've heard from some Jet fans, at least listening to sports talk radio here on the East Coast, some of them want an offensive guy because that's kind of where the game is going. Now, you could still be successful. It is true. You could still be successful if you hire a defensive guy. But you got to make sure you have the right staff around you. And that's what has to happen here. Now, the other thing, too, is, will Aaron Rodgers come back? Well, there's at least some speculation that with Aaron Glenn coming in as the Jets head coach, that means Aaron Rodgers is going to come back. So we'll have to wait and see. Again, there's just speculation there. Who knows? But Aaron Glenn probably wants to win now. I would agree with that. He wants to win now. And Aaron Rodgers, if you bring him back, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world because I don't think Aaron Rodgers was as bad as people said he was. Now, I don't think he was great, but we saw in the beginning of the year and towards the end of the year that when he's healthy, he could still be a good quarterback. Not great, but good. Good enough. But the Jets have more than just a quarterback to figure out. You know, they got to fix this defense, and you're going to be getting guys back healthy next year. Jermaine Johnson on the defensive line, you'll be getting him back. You do have to revamp this defense because the defense was a massive disappointment, and he is a defensive guy. But how is he going to handle being a head coach? Because it's more than just a defense. Now, I did talk about some things that he said, and Ben Johnson had similar remarks as well, that they're football coaches. You know, they're going to be involved in everything. So it's easier said than done. There's a lot more responsibilities when you're taking over as a head coach. And that is one of them. You have to pay attention to all aspects of the team. And obviously, you know, media stuff as well. There's a lot that goes into it. But, yeah, I mean, it just, this decision, it seemed like this was gaining traction for, you know, a week or so now that we were building up to Aaron Glenn being the guy. And supposedly, he was telling his inner circle that this was his dream job to coach the Jets. So he really wanted to be the Jets head coach. And that must have sold the Jets. I mean, that definitely had to be part of the reason why, you know, he was brought in. And, you know, you're hearing those reports that the Jets didn't want him leaving the building without agreeing to a deal. And I believe it's a 5-year deal. It's going to take it through the 2029 season. So hopefully, you know, he plays through that entire contract. Because if he does, that means that he turned out to be the guy. Now, what's interesting is the Jets still haven't brought in the GM yet as of this moment, as I'm streaming. Things can happen throughout the broadcast. Because you would think the opposite would happen. They would bring in a GM, and then they would bring in a head coach. But no, the Jets did the opposite. So we'll see what the Jets end up doing there. But, yeah, I mean, it's not like I'm a big fan of the hire, but I wouldn't say this is a bad hire. I think, you know, it could definitely pan out. But, you know, you look at the recent track record, and it's not good. Because of, you know, the past defensive guys that they've brought in to be head coaches, and it hasn't worked. And he's going to be a first-time head coach. So we'll see how it goes. But the Jets have a lot of talent on this team. And you go back to last year, and, you know, they went from being poorly coached to not coached at all. You know, how is Aaron Glenn going to be? I mean, he's coming over from a team that really has built up a culture in the Lions. And he could bring some of that over to the Jets, which is a team that desperately needs something like that. Desperately needs a culture change. Or as some people like to put it, a karma change. So we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see. Again, I don't know too much about Aaron Glenn, but, maybe he'll turn out to be what Robert Saleh was supposed to be, you know? Like I said, we'll have to wait and see on that. But let me know what you guys think about Aaron Glenn being brought in as the Jets' next head coach. How do you think he'll do? And do you think that this is an indication that maybe Aaron Rodgers is going to come back? Which it could be. But, maybe opinions change. So, some other news I wanted to bring up, though. So, the Jaguars, they actually let go of their GM, Trent Baalke. They've kind of had an interesting sequence of events. They fired Doug Peterson. Ben Johnson didn't like how they were set up, so he didn't want to take the job. Then Liam Cohen supposedly was up for the job, the offensive coordinator for the Buccaneers, and then he backed out. And now he's going to be staying with the Bucs, and now they have moved off of Trent Baalke, their GM. So they're going to be looking for a new GM and a new head coach. And I got to tell you, that job, I think it's just not that attractive. I know they got Trevor Lawrence there, but I think it's kind of similar to some other teams where you just look at the ownership and you're like, yeah, I don't want to deal with that. And I think that is what this team falls under, the Jaguars. So, we'll see who they bring in. Supposedly Robert Saleh, is up there to, get the job, which I don't think that would be the best move for Jacksonville. But, you bring him in and you see what happens. But, yeah, I wouldn't be a fan if they ended up going that route. I think he should get a defensive coordinator job. I mean, the 49ers, maybe they bring him back. I would do that, but I don't know. I also just think Pete Carroll. Who is Pete Carroll going to end up with? It could be Vegas. Maybe Jacksonville comes in and offers him the job. But listen, if I'm a football team that's looking for a change, I'm trying to bring in Pete Carroll. I think the Jets would have been a good fit for Pete Carroll. So, but, we'll see. But Aaron Glenn, to kind of move back to Aaron Glenn, though, for a second, I mean, he really, worked his way up, and I believe he started in scouting, and then he got into coaching, and then, worked his way up, and now he's got his opportunity to be a head coach. So, good for him, and I just hope it pans out, but, I wanted to bring up the Jacksonville stuff quickly because, some news on that. But, yeah, let me know what you guys think about what we talked about. We're going to take our first break now. When we come back, we'll talk about Ben Johnson, how his press conference went, what his vision is for the Bears. We'll talk about all that when we come back. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the second part of the show, we're going to now talk about Ben Johnson, his press conference with the Bears, how that went. So let's get into that. So I did like what he had to say. I watched it yesterday when he addressed the media for the first time. And like I said, I did like what he had to say. One of the main reasons why he wanted to take this Bears job is because of Caleb Williams. And I did talk about this, I talked about this yesterday, but I really do think this is going to benefit Caleb Williams a lot. And, Caleb Williams was at the press conference yesterday as well. And, he talked to the media and he said how, when they made the announcement, I guess he was in his car and he let out a scream, of excitement over it. So, he's ready to get to work. And yeah, I just think this is going to help out Caleb Williams. And, Ben Johnson talked about this. Man, we are just having a ton of issues with the camera today. I apologize, folks. But, Ben Johnson talked about the players that they have on this team. There is a lot of talent on that side of the ball. And he also talked about how, they're not going to use the same exact playbook like they used in Detroit. He talked about how, we're going to tear it down and then we're going to rebuild it and build it around the skill sets of the players that they have. And, I think he's going to be able to get more out of Caleb Williams than he would have been out of Jared Goff. And that's not a knock on Jared Goff. It's just Caleb Williams is, a different quarterback. You're going to be able to, use plays that maybe you might not necessarily been able to use with Jared Goff because Caleb Williams can move around a little bit more than Goff. Now, Goff can, take off if he has to, but, he's more of the traditional pocket passer, and for Caleb Williams, he can move around. We saw it. We saw what he could do. He could extend the play. Sometimes, that would be, sometimes you kind of want him to, get rid of the ball instead of holding on to it too long. But, it's I think this is a good hire. I really do. I think this is going to pan out for Caleb and that offense. But, he also, threw a little bit of jabs at Matt LaFleur. He said he enjoyed beating Matt LaFleur twice a year. So, if the Packers heard that, probably don't, like hearing that. But I'm curious to see how this will pan out. Because the Bears need it. They're a team that really needs it. There was optimism after, the 2023 season that, things were starting to head in the right direction. And then after, a 4-2 start, after the Hail Mary that they gave up at the end of the game against the Commanders, everything went downhill. Now, they ended up winning against the Packers the final week of the regular season. So, you hope that if you're a Bears fan, that's the beginning of what's to come. But who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But I'm on board with the Ben Johnson hiring. I think it's really going to pan out. But the thing is, they play in a tough division. That division is the best in football. And, the Bears, they did play those teams tough. They played the Packers tough both times. They played the Vikings tough the first time they went against them. And, the Thanksgiving game against the Lions, they had a chance to win that. They did. And it just, they fell a little bit short there. Well, obviously because of the mismanagement with the clock. And it's the same thing with Aaron Glenn. How is Ben Johnson going to, how is he going to handle, all aspects of the team? And, similar to Aaron Glenn, they're going to, like they both said, they're both football coaches. And, they are going to address all aspects. And, we'll see how they handle it. Man, I apologize for the camera issues. This is ridiculous. But this happens all the time. For some reason. But, I did like a lot of the things Ben Johnson had to say. But again, press conference, is one thing. Ultimately you got to go out there and you got to prove it on the field. And he talked about accountability and that players are going to have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So, I mean, he's bringing this from the Lions. And I mean, Ben Johnson didn't have the best game on Saturday. I mean, both coordinators for the Lions are not coming off of great games. They're not against the Commanders. But it's one game. Because if you remember, I overreacted to the Dan Quinn hire for the Commanders because of how poorly his defense played against the Packers. And look at what Dan Quinn's doing. He's coaching a team in the NFC Championship game right now. So we can't overreact to just one game. Ben Johnson is one of the best play callers in the NFL. And I think the Bears and how they are structured, like I said, this is a good fit for him. And he wanted this job because of the talent, the young talent that they have on this team, and there's good players on this team. It was a rough year for Caleb Williams, but I think he can only grow. I think it's only up from here. You got Rome Odunze, you got DJ Moore, you got DeAndre Swift, Cole Kmet. We'll see what happens with Keenan Allen. And then you got a defense that's pretty good that they got to fix. Now, I think they're bringing in, I think they could be bringing in Dennis Allen. I almost said Gus Bradley, but I think they're bringing in Dennis Allen. And as a coordinator, it doesn't seem like that's a bad hire. And the Bears, like I said, the Bears defense, they have good players too. So they just need to be coached right. Now, the other thing too is the media asked about the offensive line, and Ben Johnson said that's something that him and Ryan Poles are going to have to attack this offseason because Caleb Williams got sacked all over the place, and they can't have that happening. They need to protect him. That if you talk about what the need is for this team right now, it's offensive line help. And whether that's through the draft, whether that's through free agency, that is something they have to address because they got the weapons, they got the quarterback. Obviously, you could add to that defense as well, but the offensive line is a must addressed area this offseason. Has to be. So, we'll see how it goes. We will see, but it's going to be tough being in this division. And it's going to be an arms race because, you had 3 teams make the playoffs, but they all got to improve. They all got question marks. You look at the Lions, they just lost a ton. They're going to be losing not just Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson. There's other guys that could be leaving the staff. It's going to be up to Dan Campbell to try to fix things. You got the Vikings. What are they going to do with quarterback? Are they going to keep Darnold? Are they going to let him walk and start J.J. McCarthy after he missed the whole year? The Packers, they fell flat towards the end of the year. They got to get back up. And then you got the Bears, new regime. Well, new head coach. I mean, they still got the same GM. How is it going to look next year? We'll have to wait and see. But like I said, it's going to be an arms race. These teams are going to be battling with each other. I talked about the AFC North. I thought that was going to be the best division in football. It turned out to be this one. And it could be the same thing. Same thing could apply next year. So, look, press conference is one thing. Because I got to tell you, as a Giant fan, I loved the Joe Judge press conference. And then look what happened on the field. First year, I mean, they could have made the playoffs with a losing record. That's where Giant fans are at. Winning a division at 6-10 would have been great. But then the following year happens, and it's just things didn't pan out. You look at Nick Sirianni's press conference. He didn't have a good opening press conference. And look at what he's done. He's made the playoffs every single year. He's been the head coach of the Eagles. And, he's on the doorsteps of making another Super Bowl. Dan Campbell with his press conference, everybody thought he was extreme. But, the Lions have made the playoffs the last 2 years. And now we got to see what he's made of now that he's losing his top 2 coordinators. But they still have all the talent in the world on the team. So, we'll see what happens. But I'm excited just to watch, all these teams go at it next year. And now you're actually going to have, and now you got a coach that is really going to help Caleb Williams grow. Yeah, sorry, my mic cut out for a second. We're just having all kinds of technical issues today. But, we are going to have a coach now that is going to coach up Caleb Williams. And, year 2, I really do expect Caleb Williams to have a big year 2. I think he's going to do big things in 2025. And, Ben Johnson is expecting this team to win, and I think Bears fans are too. That's what they were expecting this year, or last year, whatever you want to call it. And that didn't happen. So how is it going to be this year? I think things will be better this year for the Bears. I really do believe that. But let me know what you guys think about Ben Johnson, what he had to say yesterday. If you watched the press conference, are you excited? If you're a Bears fan, how are we feeling after hearing the latest head coach speak about the team? And he's been to Chicago before, of course. He talked about going to Cubs games. This is a job he really wanted. And also the other thing too is he talked about how he could have left after the 2023 season, but he felt like he wasn't ready yet. He stayed an extra year with the Lions, and then took the Bears job this year. So, maybe that turned out to be beneficial. Maybe it doesn't make a difference. I don't know, but I don't know. I appreciate that self-awareness, that you feel like, you know what, I'm going to take as much time as possible, and then when I feel like I am truly ready to take on the next opportunity, I'll take it. I don't know. There's something about that I appreciate. So, let me know what you guys think, though. Like I said. So before we go to break, just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat. If you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast, makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day. So any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCpodcast.net. That is GSMCpodcast.net. So when we come back from our next break, we will talk about the Ravens once again, coming off of another early round exit in the playoffs. We'll talk about what the future holds for them and, just kind of get more into that discussion. So with that being said, stick around and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we're going to now get into talking about the Ravens once again. They suffered yet another early round exit. Well, last year they got eliminated in the championship game, but still, They didn't even get to the championship game this year. And it's disappointing. And I talked about this. Whichever quarterback was going to lose that game on Sunday, it was just going to be tough for them to swallow. Because you were going to hear it from the media. And that's exactly what's happening with Lamar Jackson. And look, I don't think if you put the whole game together, Lamar didn't have the worst game in the world. But that first half really set the Ravens back. Whether you're talking about the interception or the fumble, which, again, I still don't know how Lamar fumbled that. It didn't get knocked out or anything. He just simply dropped the ball. And then it was picked up by Von Miller. And, the Bills turned that into points. The Ravens, they dug themselves a hole in that game. And Lamar was, responsible for that. But he played really well in the second half. And he put themselves in a position to tie the game. But Mark Andrews dropped a pass that he catches. Now, you could go back to, previous years when the Ravens have run similar plays. And, there was the one against Pittsburgh where that ball was a little out in front, a little too out in front of Andrews. So it's not like that was, right in the breadbasket. But, Andrews has got to make that play on Sunday. And it's just, you feel for him because he's one of the better tight ends in the league. And it's just, he's been hearing it all over the place, I'm sure. But you know what? He had a great year. And he's one of the reasons why the Ravens got to where they did, which was the divisional round. It's just, there were some losses earlier in the year where, if you could have flipped those, you wouldn't be on the road. I think home field advantage played a lot into the Bills winning. Because that's why this game was so tough to pick. Because I thought both teams were evenly matched. And I just said, it's going to come down to who's at home in a way. And I think that reigned true in this game to some degree. I think if the Ravens are hosting this game, then maybe the outcome is different. But we'll never know. Turnovers were a big issue in this game. But where do the Ravens go from here? So, Derrick Henry's entering the final year of his 2-year deal. Now, I was reading that they could extend him. I mean, look at the year that he had. He was unbelievable. And, people would argue that he should have got the ball more in this game, which I'm not going to argue against that. I think Derrick Henry showed you that he's still got a lot left in the tank. And I think this is the right spot for him. I think the Ravens can get as much out of him as they can while he's still, got gas left in the tank. So I think you keep him here. And on top of that, you have Lamar Jackson. So, it's not always going to be Derrick Henry hand the ball off to him, 30 times and, that's it. No, Lamar Jackson will take some of that workload away. And, that's why a lot of times Derrick Henry's not on the field on third down. They're going to throw in Justice Hill. They could get the Ravens have the ability to give Henry a break. So I just think it's a good spot for him. I think we all do. But, Henry could still, play into his 30s. He had a big year. And if it wasn't for Saquon Barkley, he would definitely be the guy to give Offensive Player of the Year. Absolutely. And, it's just tough the way they went out. Obviously, you expect Mark Andrews to be back. For the Ravens, I think they definitely need another wide receiver on this team. And listen, they got to the second round of the playoffs. They didn't have Zay Flowers. Would Zay Flowers have made a difference? Possibly. Rashad Bateman stepped up this year. I just think they need one more pass catcher. One more. And there's receivers out there. We heard, Tyreek Hill might want out of Miami. I don't know if the Ravens will be able to do that. But how crazy would that be? Have Tyreek Hill, Lamar Jackson, and Derrick Henry on the same team? So, I don't know. There's that. We'll see what Devontae Adams ends up doing as well. You know, you got T. Higgins out there. You got Chris Godwin. There's definitely options out there for the Ravens. Or they could just go and draft a receiver. You know, and obviously they could go and try to continue to add to the defense. I know, I feel like I'm always going to say that. You know, because the defense obviously struggled at times this year early on, but they were able to figure it out. But, you know, maybe you go out and you add a pass rusher, you know, secondary help. I think it's just one of those things. It was just a tough draw for the Ravens. You know, like Lamar did not put together a full 60 minutes of good football. He didn't. But it's not like he's the main reason that they lost. He was one of the reasons they lost, but he was not the main reason. There was other factors into it that go into it. But you know, the Ravens just got to keep chugging away at it, and hopefully that eventually it goes their way, because they are one of the elite teams in the NFL. I do believe that. And, you know, there is a certain window that you do have. I agree with that because, you know, Derrick Henry, like I said, you could extend him, and he's still got a lot of gas left in the tank. But, you know, next year he could fall off a cliff or something, you know, and, you know, not be as productive. It's possible. And, you know, Lamar Jackson at some point, you know, he's not going to be able to use his legs. You know, he's going to have to throw from the pocket more. So, you know, you got to hopefully things go your way at some point. You know, Lamar's gotten some comparisons to Peyton Manning because Peyton Manning, it took a while for him to win his first ring. I mean, his first year was what, 1998? And then he didn't win his first championship until 2006. 2006, 2007 season. And then he didn't win his second Super Bowl until his last year, 2015. And that was because his defense carried him that year. So, you know, could that be the same thing for Lamar? Maybe. It's possible. And, you know what? Lamar has done a better job throwing from the pocket than he did when he first started. So you just got to continue to work on that. And then eventually, you know, when you have to become that pocket passer, you know, you'll be okay. And like I said, I think he's made big strides over the course of his career from when he first started, where, you know, he's not bad throwing from the pocket. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But, you know, I know Ravens fans, there's some that have kind of, I would take John Harbaugh in a heartbeat. I really would. Because the amount of head coach. Sorry, now my mic keeps cutting out. But the amount of head coaches that we've gone through, I mean, I would take John Harbaugh. AFC North. They have John Harbaugh and they have Mike Tomlin. I would take them both in a heartbeat. Because you know what? Yeah, they might not get to the big game, but you know what? They make the playoffs almost every year. And as long as you get into the dance, you have a chance. You have some chance to make it. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, you know, with them. But I understand. Look, you know, it's been a long time since, you know, the Ravens did something, you know, since Joe Flacco, you know, went on that run. But at some point, you would think they would have to break through, right? I mean, they have to. You know, this is a good team. This is a good team. It's just, you know, they just are on the losing end. I mean, last year, I think was their chance. I really do. I believe that. Last year was their chance. Man, This is probably one of the worst days with my camera, really. I mean, I don't know what is going on. But this is, I mean, this was, last year was their chance. I really do believe that last year was their opportunity to get to the Super Bowl and win it. Because I do think if they get past the Chiefs, I mean, did you see what they did to the 49ers on Christmas? You know, like, I think they probably win it. I believe that. I mean, we'll never know, but they dominated them on Christmas. So, you know, it's just it's been tough sledding for them. And you know, it's just another year that ends in disappointment. And Lamar Jackson might win back-to-back MVPs. And yeah, I was looking at the numbers between him and Josh Allen. I mean, Josh Allen only has 28 touchdown passes. Lamar Jackson has over 40. But Josh Allen has all those rushing touchdowns. I don't know. It's a close race. I originally said Josh Allen, but you know, now I'm like, I mean, look, I think if you're going to give it to Lamar Jackson, don't feel guilty about it. Give it to Lamar. Don't feel like, well, you know, he won it last year. Josh probably deserves it. No. If Lamar Jackson deserves the MVP, Lamar Jackson should get the MVP. You know, we've seen players win back-to-back MVPs. The most recent player to do it was Aaron Rodgers. If Lamar Jackson deserves it, give it to Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson had a better year stats-wise than he did last year. Because last year, I didn't think any quarterback deserved it, to be quite honest with you. I think he should have gave it to McCaffrey. This year is different. So it's just disappointing because, again, if Lamar wins another MVP, you know, nobody cares about that because they're going to talk about how he didn't show up in the playoffs. Even though he did, just in the second half, in the game that they lost. But, you know, people will complain about this. Say, well, he threw an interception. He fumbled. I mean, you know, he's got to get it done. But you know what? It's not just him. We're going to talk about them in the next segment, but we are in a unique kind of era. Because you look at the AFC, and outside of Joe Burrow and Tom Brady, you know, it's all Patrick Mahomes. It's all Patrick Mahomes coming from the AFC. And that's why, you know, Josh Allen hears it, and we'll see if, you know, he finally breaks through on Sunday, and Lamar Jackson hears it. And now Joe Burrow is starting to hear it again because now it's like, all right, well, what have you done for me lately? It's, you know, it's all Patrick Mahomes, and someone has to knock him off. So speaking of Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, but let me know what you guys think, though, about the Ravens and where do you see them going from here. I mean, look, I expect them to be a playoff team next year if everybody's healthy, you know, and they just try again. That's really what it comes down to. Because there's not really much to add to this team other than maybe another weapon and, you know, defensive help. But I think you're going to run it back. And you just hope that it breaks your way. But when we come back, we're going to talk about the Chiefs as they are on the doorsteps of yet another Super Bowl appearance. And I just wanted to talk about them and give you my thoughts. So with that being said, stick around. And we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the fourth part of the show. Let's get into talking about the Chiefs. So, out of all the games from divisional weekend, their game was probably the least entertaining, in my opinion. I did talk about this. Really, the only things I took away from it, and many people took away from it, is just the penalties. But that's not the reason why the Chiefs won. But they are on the doorsteps, once again, of making the Super Bowl and possibly winning it. And, I had this team accomplishing that, getting back to the Super Bowl and winning their third consecutive Super Bowl. I still believe that is on the table. I mean, it's going to be tough because I don't think, the teams that are left, I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk for them. They got to get past Josh Allen, who's an MVP candidate. I mean, they've owned him in the playoffs, but still, all those games, I mean, other than the AFC Championship game during the COVID season, I mean, the other two playoff games, I mean, they were close. So, I expect it to be the same thing when they play against each other on Sunday. And then, on the other side, in the NFC, the Commanders, they are playing really well right now. They're playing some good football. And then you got the Eagles, who you have faced off against. Now, you did beat them in the Super Bowl, but I think this Eagles team is better than that Super Bowl team. I believe that. And then last season, they beat you during the regular season. So, it's if the Chiefs get to the Super Bowl, I mean, obviously they got to get past the Bills, but if they, get past the Bills, I mean, it's not going to be a cakewalk. It's not. But just the fact that what they have been able to do, and I sound like a broken record because I talked about the same thing last year, what they have been able to accomplish is something that we'll probably never see again. Now, with the Patriots, they kind of had two separate eras. They had, the early 2000s, and then they had, the mid to late 2010s, where they went on a run, and Tom Brady won 3 rings, and then he won another ring with the Bucs. And then they kind of just, once Brady left the Patriots, Brady's last year of with the Patriots marked the beginning of the Patrick Mahomes era in the AFC. Now, I know there was a little blip, I guess, when Brady beat Mahomes in the Super Bowl, but he was with the NFC. But once Brady left, the AFC shifted to now, okay, this is now the Chiefs conference. And that's really all it's been. I mean, Patrick Mahomes has made it to the AFC Championship game every single year that he's been a starting quarterback. It's unbelievable. And the 2 losses to the Bengals and the Patriots, they came in overtime. So it takes everything to knock this guy off. Now, in the Super Bowl against the Buccaneers, well, the Bucs defense, everybody talks about Brady, and Brady did have a good Super Bowl that year. The 3 touchdown passes, but let's be honest. The real reason why the Buccaneers won that Super Bowl was because of their defense. Brady didn't have to be great to win that. Now, if it was a level playing field and, Mahomes was not running for his life, I mean, do the Bucs still win that? Yeah, probably. But I think the game would have been closer had Mahomes not been running for his life the whole game. I don't know. That's just me. But it's because when you look at social media and you just see like, oh yeah, I mean, Mahomes has lost to Brady twice in the playoffs. He'll never, be as good as Brady. Okay, well, the Super Bowl was because of the defense, and then the AFC Championship game, that game went to overtime, and Mahomes didn't even get the ball in overtime. It's not like Brady, blew him out every single time. And look at the regular season. It was even in the regular season. I mean, Mahomes won, I think, 3 out of 4? I mean, the first game they played against each other, the final score was like what? It was, I don't even remember. It was like 40, what was it, 41-38? I don't even think it was that. I think there was even more points. That was the first meeting between the two. Because 2019, I know Mahomes won. 2020, in the regular season, Mahomes won. 2022, Mahomes won. I mean, it's just people act like, Brady, like, blew Mahomes out every single time. It's not true. But I guess because, he's 2-0 against Mahomes in the playoffs, that means, he's always going to be better. Sorry, this turned into a Brady-Mahomes debate. And it's also kind of interesting how you go back to when Mahomes first won the Super Bowl, everybody wanted him to win it. But now everyone's like, all right, that's enough. We're sick and tired of this. Because they just keep winning. All they do is win, win, win. And, that's why you're seeing once again, you're seeing all the Josh Allen edits. And, before that, last week you were seeing all the CJ Stroud edits. Look, some of us have to just take a step back and just appreciate what we're watching. What we are seeing, again, probably never going to happen again. If the Chiefs end up three-peating, I mean, you saw history. Now, if they end up losing against the Bills on Sunday, well, then this conversation doesn't mean anything. But it's pretty special what they have accomplished. And, Mahomes, if he were to retire right now, he's a first-ballot Hall of Famer. He's had a Hall of Fame career in 7 years. He's still got more to go. Now, he could end up having what happened to Brady, where, you go 10 years without winning another ring, and then towards the end of your career, you start up again. Could. But, if he ends up winning one this year, well, he's got 4 rings, which would be one more than Brady from the early part of Brady's career. Which, I mean, again, I'm not trying to stir the pot, but I feel like I kind of did that already in this segment. That's the thing. Mahomes is always going to be compared to Brady. Like, that's always it's always going to be just comparing. And for me, I'm not really about that. I mean, when I was younger, yes, but now it's kind of just, hey, look, Tom Brady, one of the greatest careers of all time, one of the greatest players of all time. Patrick Mahomes is the same deal. At this point, I don't really care who's better. What I care about is, hey, I was able to watch these two guys play. And the other thing, too, is, I mean, you hope that at some point this changes. I kind of want this to change at some point. But, and I believe I brought this up already, but we had parity. Back when you had Breeze, Rodgers, Brady, Peyton, Big Ben, Eli, Joe Flacco, we had parity. Like, there were different, the Patriots were still, in AFC championship games pretty much every year. But it wasn't always the Patriots winning every single year. We had different quarterbacks get their flowers. And in this Mahomes era, the ones that have won Super Bowls are from, like I said, the previous era. So, who is going to be that quarterback that finally puts themselves, maybe not exactly in the same conversation as Patrick Mahomes, but just kind of narrows the gap? Could it be Josh Allen? Could it be Jalen Hurts? Could it be Jane Daniels? We'll have to see. But I just think the run that the Chiefs have been on, it's unbelievable. And, I know there's people out there that'll say, oh, because of the penalties, they get the flags to go their way. But it's more than just that. It's more than just that. I will say some of the flags do happen at maybe the worst times. Like, you go back to when they won the Super Bowl against the Eagles. The AFC Championship game against the Bengals, Mahomes gets knocked out of bounds. They throw a flag, a 15-yard penalty, and, they're able to kick a field goal to win the game. And maybe if they don't get in the field goal range, what happens? Do they go to overtime and, Burrow gets the ball first and, what happens? There was more than just that play that dictated that game. It's just that happened at the worst time. And then even the Super Bowl that year against the Eagles. So actually go back to that, where there was that holding call, that took more time off the clock. And then, the Chiefs kicked a field goal with little time left. And, the Eagles really didn't have a shot to go down the field and try to tie the game. It's just things happen at the worst times. But I can't sit here and say, well, don't throw the flag in that moment. I know people say that, but look, if it's a penalty, you're going to throw a flag. Now, I thought some of the flags on Saturday were not the right calls, were bad calls. I mean, you had Troy Aikman and Joe Buck complaining about them too. I mean, when you have two Texans players colliding with each other and Mahomes is underneath and they throw a flag and give a 15-yard penalty, yeah, it's not a good look. But it's also Mahomes doing it, because he knows he can do that. Because he knows that there'll be a flag. Now, I think he said that's not what he's trying to do, but, I mean, some people would disagree with that. But look, everyone talks about the penalties. This team is a great team. They're doing it with the same quarterback, same head coach, same tight end, same defensive tackle, same defensive coordinator. What they've been able to accomplish is amazing. And if they're able to pull it off, I mean, that's something that Tom Brady was never able to do. So we'll have to wait and see. But I just think what they have been able to do is special. And look, for some people, they'll appreciate it. For others, they're like, all right, just please lose on Sunday. You got to appreciate it to an extent. So we're going to take our final break of the show now. When we come back, we will talk about the NFC Championship game, because I know we did a segment on the AFC Championship game yesterday, but we'll talk about the NFC Championship game. And, not going to preview it and give you my pick, but we'll talk about it. We'll talk a little bit about it, because this is the third meeting between these two teams, the Commanders and the Eagles. So for one final time today, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we're just going to talk a little bit about the NFC Championship game. We're not going to preview it, but, just kind of get into talking about it because, we did a topic, like I said, on the AFC Championship game yesterday. So give the NFC Championship game some love as well, because this game is going to be good too. So my friends actually, while I was in break, I was reading our group chat, and supposedly the Giants may be interested in Derek Carr. Nobody really, I don't think people seem that thrilled about it. I mean, look, I'm not going to be jumping up and down if the Giants got him, but the Giants need a quarterback. And, Derek Carr, I think could win you some games, but I don't think, he at this point, he'd probably be a bridge guy. So that's really kind of my thoughts on that. But the Giants need to win. And, if they were able to get him, I wouldn't be upset about it. But anyways, let's get into the NFC Championship game. Didn't want to spend too much on that, but I wanted to bring that up. Third meeting between the Eagles and the Commanders. The Eagles won the first meeting on that Thursday night. Saquon Barkley had a couple of touchdowns in that game. He also had a touchdown in the second game. Jalen Hurts got hurt in that game, suffered the concussion. Jalen Hurts is actually a little bit banged up going into this game. Because if you remember, he got a little bit banged up in the game against the Rams. But he's going to play. This gets us started. This will be the first game of Championship Sunday. And look, the Commanders, this is a team that I just, I've said it all along. I did not expect this team to be that good this year. I most certainly did not. Even if they were decent, I most certainly did not expect them to make the playoffs and get all the way to the NFC Championship game. But here they are. They're playing really good football right now. Jaden Daniels is playing really good football right now. And you got to give them a lot of credit. And it's going to be tough to go into Philly and knock them off. But, if you remember the last time, they went into Philly, they did lose that game. But Jaden Daniels is not 100%. And that was early on in the season. The Commanders, they're going to come to play. And the Eagles, the last time their defense went up against Jaden Daniels, they had a big lead, but Jaden Daniels and that Commanders team, they came back and, they won the game at the end. Jaden Daniels threw the game-winning touchdown to, I believe it was Jamison Crowder. So, a couple of things I was looking at. So, the Commanders, they did suffer an injury to their best offensive lineman. Sam Cosmi, I think that's how you pronounce his name, but he tore his ACL. It's arguably their best offensive lineman, so they lost him for the game. It might be saying Trent Scott, an 8-year pro, could be his replacement. So we'll see what happens with that. But also the Eagles on the defensive side of the ball, you had Nakobe Dean get hurt. He played really well against the Commanders in both games. He combined for 15 stops. So he might not be, looks like he's not playing in this game. So if the Eagles lose him, that's a tough loss on the defensive side of the ball. They also didn't have Dallas Goedert the last time they played against the Commanders, so that's going to be big to have him back for this game. C.J. Gardner-Johnson was ejected from the game the last game, so they'll be getting him back. They'll have him back for this game. You had Jonathan Allen for the Commanders. He'll be back for this game, so that'll be big for them. We'll see what happens. But, I expect, look, every time, the last, 4 meetings between these two teams, it's been high scoring. Even last year, Commanders are not very good, but they played the Eagles tough. The Commanders are the only loss that the Eagles have suffered over the last, couple of months now. Obviously they lost to the Bucs early on this season, but the Eagles have not lost a lot of games this year, and when they have, it's been to the Commanders. And then who's the other loss? That was to that was to the Falcons. That's right, early on in the season when Barkley dropped the ball close to the goal line. Well, not close to the goal line, but in the near the red zone. But look, and the Eagles are coming off of a game where their offense, their passing game wasn't very good. So the Eagles really, when it comes to their passing game is going to need to step up a little bit. Jalen Hurts is going to have to play a little bit better. He hasn't turned the ball over, so you give him credit there. That's the thing. When it comes down to these 4 games, or these 2 games, which team is going to be the team that blinks first and turns it over? Because that could very well dictate a game. But when it comes to this one, I think, look, the Commanders and the Eagles, they know each other well. And, I think we're going to see a good game. How are the Commanders going to stop Saquon Barkley? Because Saquon Barkley has run wild on them this year. Well, Saquon Barkley's run wild on a lot of teams this year. Just ask the Rams. How are they going to stop him? I think for the Commanders, they got to try to contain Barkley a little bit. and get Jalen Hurts to, throw the ball. Try to beat them through the air. And I think they definitely can because, you got, a good tight end. And you got two very talented receivers, 1A and 1B. But, there are people that are down on Jalen Hurts. And, if Jalen Hurts can be the reason that the Eagles win this game, that would silence the critics at least for 1 week. But I think this game you could definitely see this going back and forth. I think both games you could see that. Because, Jane Daniels and that Commanders offense, they just kept answering. They just kept answering the bell. They have converted. The fourth downs that they have been able to convert on have been huge. They gave the Lions a taste of their own medicine. Now, they're not going to be playing up against they are not playing against a banged up defense this week. They're not. The Eagles are pretty much at full strength on defense. I know Quinyon Mitchell got hurt in the game against the Rams, I believe. So we'll see what his status is. But but then again, you saw what the Commanders did against the Eagles defense the last time they played against them. So, we'll see. And Jane Daniels is going to have to use his legs. Both quarterbacks, we've seen what they've been able to do. They have their mobility. That's one of their strengths. Hurts had that long rushing touchdown last week. So, we'll see what happens here. But, I'm very curious to see how this game plays out. And, when it comes to Dan Quinn, I've said all along, was not a fan of the hire, but look at what he was able to do. He was a defensive coordinator for the Legion of Boom, and then he took the Falcons to the Super Bowl. It's not like he was not. Now, I know they suffered a historic collapse in the Super Bowl, but he still got his team to the Super Bowl. And now he's got another team in the championship game. So it's not like he's never been successful. It's just how things finished out in Atlanta and then how things finished out in Dallas. That's kind of what, made me think of the hiring in a negative light. Anthony in the chat says, I think what people are forgetting is the Lions had major injuries across their defensive line and line back and core. Yeah, no, it's true. They had a ton of injuries. And the Commanders took advantage of that. But also the Lions turned the ball over. That led to points. When it comes to the Eagles, the Eagles haven't turned the ball over yet. Other than, I guess the safety, but they didn't actually turn the ball over. So, you're playing against a team that hasn't turned the ball over. You're playing against a team that has got a better defense. So this is going to be the Commanders' toughest test in the playoffs. Because I had my concerns about the Bucs defense coming into the playoffs, and you see why. The Lions being banged up, the Commanders were able to move the ball at will on them, but also it didn't help that the Lions turned the ball over. Now you're going up against a team that has not turned the ball over just like you. So the Commanders are going to have to play clean football to win this game. Anthony also in the chat says, does Dan Campbell get fired because coaches have got fired for a lot more and Dan Quinn got fired after taking the Falcons to the Super Bowl? Well, he got fired 2 years after, taking them to the Super Bowl. 2018, I believe, was his last year, right? 2018? I think it was after the 2018 season. Because they just didn't make the playoffs. No, Dan Campbell's not getting fired. I think next year is going to be very telling of what Dan Campbell is made of because, you're going to lose a lot of your coaching staff. So, if the Lions go and have a brutal year, well, then maybe you got to think about it. But the Lions still got all those young players. They're still going to be a good team next year. But it's now, how is Dan Campbell going to pick up the pieces and put together the right staff to get themselves back on track? Quinn got fired that following offseason. If you're talking about after the Super Bowl, he didn't get fired after the Super Bowl. He was still there. He was still there for another year. let's see. Dan Campbell. We have to look this up now. I think he got fired after the 2018 season. I think he did not get fired after he lost the Super Bowl. Kyle Shanahan left. Kyle Shanahan left to coach the 49ers, but Quinn still stayed. Let's look Dan Quinn's coaching career, just to double check. Oh, actually, I'm wrong about that. 2018. Try 2020. He was with the Falcons from 2015 to 2020. I don't know why I thought he was going a lot sooner than that. But yeah, from 2015 to 2020, he was the head coach of the Falcons, and then he went to DC. Well, he became the Cowboys DC. That's what I meant to say. Then he went to Washington DC, and now he's the head coach of the Commanders. Oh, I didn't know he was a defensive line coach for Hofstra. That's by my neck of the woods. But yeah, so 2020 is when, after the 2020 season, he was let go. But, I think many people probably wanted him gone after the Super Bowl loss. But anyways, so yeah, we're going to preview this game tomorrow. We will preview the AFC Championship game tomorrow. I mean, I know we kind of previewed both of the games already, but I'll give you my picks for those games tomorrow. We'll talk about any other news that breaks regarding head coaches or GMs, things like that. So that is pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the video. And until next time, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys next time. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna